Welcome to today's lecture on civil engineering failures and lessons. In this session, we'll talk about Lake Urmia, located in northwestern Iran. Once celebrated as the largest saltwater lake in the Middle East and one of the largest in the world, it has now shrunk to just a fraction of its former size. Its story is not only about environmental change, but also about how engineering decisions, dams, causeways, irrigation projects, combined with policy mismanagement, can transform a thriving ecosystem into an ecological disaster. Lake Urmia is a case study in how good intentions in engineering, when not carefully integrated into environmental planning, can lead to long-term failure. Lake Urmia sits between the provinces of East and West Azerbaijan in Iran. For centuries, it was an ecological treasure, home to brine shrimp, a critical food source for migratory birds like flamingos and pelicans, and a place of natural beauty that supported tourism, agriculture, and local communities. At its peak, it spanned nearly 5,000 square kilometers, making it larger than some entire countries. But beginning in the late 20th century, human interventions began to reshape its fate. Infrastructure projects intended to support agriculture and economic development gradually deprived the lake of its lifeblood, water. What makes this case especially relevant for civil engineering is that it wasn't one single project that doomed Lake Urmia. It was the cumulative impact of many poorly coordinated engineering and policy decisions. The collapse of Lake Urmia can be traced to four main causes, and almost all are connected to engineering. First, dams and diversions. Over 40 dams were constructed on the rivers feeding into the lake, including the Agche and Mahabad. These dams were designed to provide water for irrigation and urban supply, but they dramatically reduced the inflow that sustained the lake. Second, irrigation mismanagement. Water-intensive crops were promoted in an already semi-arid basin, and large-scale withdrawals siphoned off the rivers before they could replenish the lake. Third, infrastructure fragmentation. In 2008, the Shahid Kalantari Causeway was completed, effectively splitting the lake in two. The structure restricted water circulation between the north and south basins, accelerating salinity imbalance. Instead of a single dynamic lake, Urmia was cut into compartments, with one part drying much faster. Finally, climate pressures. Rising temperatures and drought worsened the situation, but they were not the primary cause. The overwhelming factor was human engineering without integrated planning. The results were catastrophic. By the 2010s, Lake Urmia had shrunk to less than 10% of its original size. What had once been an inland sea was replaced by vast salt flats. As the water receded, salinity levels skyrocketed, reaching nearly saturation. Brine shrimp populations, the foundation of the ecosystem, collapsed. Without shrimp, migratory birds lost their food source and disappeared. But the disaster extended beyond ecology. Salt storms began sweeping across the region, carrying fine particles mixed with heavy metals and pollutants. These storms damaged crops, contaminated soils, and created serious public health risks for millions of people. Economically, communities dependent on agriculture, fisheries, and tourism suffered deeply. Farmers faced declining yields, while tourism along the lake's shores virtually disappeared. In some areas, people were forced to migrate. The decline of Lake Urmia became not only an environmental tragedy, but also a social and economic crisis. In 2013, recognizing the severity of the crisis, Iran launched the Lake Urmia Restoration Program, with support from international organizations like the UNDP and JICA. The plan included reducing irrigation demand, modifying dam operations, and re-establishing environmental flows to the lake. Some progress was made, especially in wet years around 2019, when water levels temporarily rose. However, progress has been uneven. Political and financial constraints, combined with ongoing drought and climate change, have slowed the restoration. Local farmers are still under pressure to use water for crops, while enforcement of restrictions has been difficult. In short, the lake's restoration is fragile, and its long-term survival remains uncertain. So, what lessons can we as civil engineers take away from Lake Urmia? First, holistic water management is essential. Building dams or irrigation projects in isolation may look successful, but without considering the whole watershed, these projects can disrupt critical balances. Second, ecosystems must be part of the equation. The collapse of Urmia shows what happens when environmental flows are ignored. Third, infrastructure design must respect hydrology. The causeway should have been designed to preserve water exchange, but instead, it cut the lake in half. Fourth, policy and governance are inseparable from engineering. Even the best technical solutions fail without political will and enforcement. And finally, Lake Urmia demonstrates the responsibility of civil engineers to think beyond short-term benefits. Sustainable design requires foresight, interdisciplinary collaboration, and accountability for long-term consequences. In conclusion, Lake Urmia was not just a victim of climate change or bad luck. It was a victim of engineering without integration. Dams, irrigation, and causeways were built, but no one asked the larger question: how do these projects interact? And what is their cumulative impact on the lake's survival? The lake's story is tragic, but it gives us an opportunity to reflect. As engineers, we must design not just for today's needs, but also for tomorrow's resilience. Lake Urmia is a stark reminder that our projects shape not only infrastructure, but entire ecosystems and societies. Thank you for joining this session of Civil Engineering Failures and Lessons. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into engineering successes and failures. And be sure to check out the other videos in this series to continue learning from the past to build a better future.